progress.
Hello and welcome to this discussion on harnessing emerging technologies in India. My name is Diksha Madhok and I'm delighted to moderate this session. Let me quickly introduce our speakers. We have with us Rajan Anandan, Managing Director of Sequoia Capital India, Megan Fellon, who's the Director Barefoot College in India, Jay Shroff, who's the Global CEO UPL, and Katie Ramarao, Minister of IT, Industries, Municipal Administration and Urban Development of Telangana. Before we begin, let me just talk about the structure of this session. It's a two-part session. The first 30 minutes are open to public. Feel free to share it on social media. If you do tweet about this event, please use hashtag Davos Agenda. The next 30 minutes are open to forum participants. You can start leaving your questions in the chat box, and I'll try to include as many as possible. I'll talk about this in detail again once once the second part starts. So let's dive in. Minister, I would like to begin with you. At one of your recent events, you actually said that we need to redefine IT in India, and it shouldn't stand for information technology anymore, but intelligence technology. Can you talk a little bit more about that and unpack that thought for us?
Well, thank you, Diksha. Thank you for this opportunity. Once again, unreal times, in fact, surreal world that we live in. We all have to kind of not meet at Davos, but instead, meet virtually like this. But nevertheless, good seeing you all. Good, good to get on a forum which talks about harnessing technologies and harnessing good ideas, for the humanity at large and for all of us in these testing times. What I meant when I said we have to redefine IT, we have to redefine IT, I had meant that the technologies, that have been, benefiting all of us, that are the technologies that have been, the technological changes that have been sweeping the entire landscape for the last 2.5, 3 decades. Now, I think we need to take a closer look at the overall situation and understand that there are technologies which can really help our most common, problems that are prevalent across the world. In fact, our Honorable Chief Minister never fails to remind us. Each and every time we talk to him about any kind of technology, the first question he asks us is, how does it help positively? How does it positively impact a common man? So therefore, the point I'm trying to make is that any technology which does not have a societal impact, in my humble opinion, is going to be futile. Now, intelligent technologies, the point I was trying to make there was, if you look at something like artificial intelligence, which in fact we had declared last year in Telangana as the year of AI, we have used AI and its applications in a number of fields like agriculture, like healthcare, and we've been able to come out with some tangible outcomes which have benefited our farmers, which have benefited the common man on the ground here. So these sort of leveraging, this sort of ability to leverage these emerging technologies is something that Telangana is very upbeat about, Telangana is very keen on. In fact, we partnered with WEF on a project called as the Medicine from the Sky. Now, that is something that we're very proud of. These sort of ideas which can take us forward. In fact, even when we said AI for AI, innovation in agriculture and, how can we leverage artificial intelligence in innovations in agriculture? This is another opportunity where we had to collaborate with WEF. We definitely are looking forward to more opportunities to discuss, to work together, and to come out with solutions that are not only for Telangana, but will also be useful for the rest of the world as well.
Thank you, Minister. And this, using technology for agriculture leads me to Jay. My question for you is, what are some of the biggest problems that we are seeing in agriculture in India today, and how can technology solve it?
Thank you very much. A pleasure to see all of you, Minister. Pleasure. I think what we take for granted today in our normal lives is not the same for a farmer, particularly a smallholder farmer. A smallholder farmer will definitely have 5 disruptions in a 5-year period. He will definitely have a flood. He will definitely have a drought. He'll definitely have a commodity price collapse. He'll definitely have some pest or disease impacting his yields, and some other for sure. How do we, and this is the only community which puts all their capital in investment in their business. There's no other community in the world who takes all the capital they have, probably borrow some money and put it onto a business which has this much risk. We take for granted today that we have a mishap with our car or medical mishap. We go to the hospital, the insurance pays, everything gets taken care of eventually, and we that's the life of a modern day person. Why can't we enable a farmer, the smallholder farmers, not only in India, but anywhere in the world? How do we enable them to be more resilient, right? How do we create an environment where they become bankable? How do we take care of some of the challenges which we take for granted living in urban areas? Why can't we create products for them, right? There is a lot of effort and a lot of products being developed, but I think today using technology we can individualize a product using technology to take risks, individual risks out. For example, if it doesn't rain first 30 days, he has to replant his seed. Can we insure him? Because when he does that, right, with climate change, this is guaranteed. You can be rest assured that you expected rain on 10th of June, and you probably got one shower and you got nothing till 10th of July. And the guy is already bankrupt, right? He cannot recover from that. How do we create resilience? And I'm very excited about all the opportunities which we can do to really uplift them. How do we make him sustainable? How do we really bring in technologies, products to give him, make his business more resilient, him more resilient? Today there's telemedicine, there's all these things which can we sort of give him at an affordable rate. If we take for granted, we'll call a doctor 24/7 for help. What does a guy in the village do? Do you even ever imagine what he does when his child is sick and he is helpless? So I think there is a lot we can do to improve resilience. And at UPL we are completely focused on creating resilience and just livelihood. And we are investing in a lot of technology to take care of some of these obvious challenges being faced by farmers.
Thank you, Jay. And talking about investing in technologies, I'll come to Rajan now. Rajan, this has been 2020 has been a weird year, as the minister said. And we saw a lot of tech entrepreneurs, a lot of tech companies in India suffer during the lockdown. And some of them actually managed to recover pretty well later on. So what is it about some of Indian tech entrepreneurs? How did they manage to survive and thrive, during this slowdown? How did they innovate? How did they adapt?
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, so look, I think as all of us know, 2020 was an extraordinarily difficult year for all of humanity, right? For we had the largest healthcare crisis, economic crisis, and humanitarian crisis we haven't seen in 100 years. And the same was true for the Indian startup ecosystem, right? I'd say, for our ecosystem, it was really a tale of two halves. In the first half, especially in the April, May, June quarter, what we saw is about 15% of India's startups had to shut down because revenue went to zero, markets sort of came to a halt, funding came to a grinding halt, etc. So that's the first thing. And in that same quarter, April, May, June of 2020, venture funding in India declined by 55%, right? So that was a pretty stark quarter, and you can compare that to, I think, the GDP decline of about 24% or so. But the second half.
Go on, Rajan. We can hear you.
Okay. The second half actually saw a very different tale, where what we saw was digital startups or digitally led parts of the startup ecosystem actually more than recovered, right? So in fact, we did a piece of research, TIE, Delhi NCR with Zinnov that we published in October. By the end of September, with the exception of travel and hospitality and dining restaurants, all other sectors where startups, digitally led startups were participating were actually significantly ahead of where they were in February of 2020, right? So essentially by the end of the year, with the exception of a few sectors where startups, travel and hospitality, particularly, in all other sectors, basically the sector was up either 20%, 50%, or in cases like digital health, it was up 5 times. So we saw this tale of two halves. Then what's very, very interesting is in the year 2020, despite COVID, India had 11 new unicorns, right? We had more new billion-dollar startups that got created. They became billion-dollar companies in 2020 than we did in 2019. And in fact, we exited 2020 with a total of 37 unicorns. And in fact, this year, what's very, very interesting is, despite the fact that we're still in the middle of COVID, we are going to begin to see something we haven't seen in the Indian startup economy ever, which is IPOs, right? So Indigo will go public next week, which is a very, very interesting consumer products company. And then I think you'll see a whole series of Indian startups, technology startups, fintech startups, consumer product startups that have been built over the last decade begin to go public. So in many ways, you're seeing this around the world, right? Digital is leading the economic recovery in many, many parts of the world. And the same is true for India. So I'd say the first big thing is growth is accelerating. Second, we are beginning to see Indian startups that are getting to a size and scale where they're able to go public. And I'd say the most interesting thing, and I think the most relevant thing that's happening in our startup ecosystem is building for India and building for the real India, right? Building for 1 billion people is beginning to happen. And I can share, as we get into the discussion, I can share some very, very interesting examples of business models that we have not, as Sequoia Capital, we invest across the world. We are seeing business models in India today that we have not seen anywhere else in the world. And the reason we are seeing entrepreneurs building these companies is because they're building for the Indian consumer who's beyond the first 100, 200, 300 million internet user.
Amazing. Building for India brings me to Megan. Megan, you've written that something very interesting, that the technologists of future are going to be illiterate and semi-literate women from rural areas in India. That's fascinating. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. I think You know, the pandemic has done many things, but one of the things it's done is really crystallize the need for us to begin to see technology as a tool for creating justice, inclusion, and that it has a strong role in building citizenship and actually as a mechanism for service. And that relates directly to this idea of inclusion. And in fact, to build on what the minister said, which is that we need to really adopt this fascinating challenge-based learning mindset and a challenge-based solution mindset that puts the evolution and innovations directly coming from need. And I think that's something that has actually made a lot of progress in the last couple of years in India, a real understanding by young entrepreneurs in the tech space that they really need to go back to the villages, go back to rural areas and learn about how that needs to happen. Now, specifically, we had a fascinating example of this because we began looking at why women were left out of the system of transactional and micro-entrepreneurial behavior at the first mile. And of course, their biggest barrier is literacy. And of course, working and trying to design across multiple languages in India. And with the help of the Apple App Developer Academy, we really adopted this partnership that was grounded in challenge-based thinking. And that put 300 rural women with the design team, designing UX and UI directly to meet their needs. And this has resulted in far fewer mistakes, far less loss of money and funds in that innovation process, and actually a really strong solution that is adopted on its first use by 98% of users. So of course that saves us time in the prototyping and the rollout possibilities. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity if we begin to include and open up our mindset about who should be involved in design process of technology.
Thank you, Megan. I'll come back to you, Rajan, connected to what Megan just said, and you also talked about. So the first wave of tech startups in India, a lot of them were called Me Too startups. They were inspired by companies that were already there in the Valley. And you were saying that now we are seeing a lot of companies a lot of entrepreneurs who are actually innovating for Bharat. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Give us some examples.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll maybe give talk about a few companies. The first one is a company called Meesho, right? I don't know how many of you have heard of Meesho, but it is really a next generation e-commerce company that is building a sort of an e-commerce model the world's never seen before, right? And what Meesho does is, it basically enables in their case, sort of housewives, Indian housewives, to become resellers, right? So instead of, having an e-commerce site where, let's say, an Amazon or a Flipkart, where consumers go to that site and they start buying products, now what Meesho, by the way, has today is they have 3 million women. It's 100% women, almost all of whom were not working, who are now sort of Meesho, Meesho team members, right? They're not on their books, but they essentially make a living by reselling products. So what happens is they can buy products off the Meesho catalogs. So Meesho doesn't sell directly to consumers, right? And these women then share those catalogs, and they can pick which products they're interested in, etc. And then they share their quote unquote catalogs with actually their network. And then that network's order, and then Meesho ships the product directly to those consumers, right? Now, what Meesho has done, this company is all of 4 or 5 years old. They have had 9 million women who have actually made an income on the Meesho platform, right? And every month, 3 million women actually are essentially Meesho are sellers, right? So essentially think of them as they become entrepreneurs. And this is super interesting because imagine in a country where, women the women in the workforce, I don't know the latest number, Megan would know, it used to be 23%. Imagine if we can take Meesho from 9 million women to 100 million women, right? And the 3 million active, if we can get it to 30 million active women, these are women who, were not, and as you guys know, right, 50% of Indian graduates are women, but only 23% of our workforce is sort of women, right? So that's a very interesting company, and we do think this is going to become a very, very large e-commerce company, and in many ways is going to define e-commerce for the next 500 million in India. So that's one example. A second example is a company called Katabook, right? So Katabook, basically what they, India has 75 million small businesses, right? Most of these are small businesses with 2, 3, 4, 5 employees. Until 2 years ago, maybe 2 million, 3 million out of the 75 million small businesses use software of any kind for their business, right? India now has 500 million internet users. So, the small business owner obviously has a smartphone and they probably use WhatsApp and YouTube and search and things like that, but they were not using any software as a utility to run their businesses better. So about 2 years ago, Katabook launched their app. And what this app is, it's a basic ledger app, right? So it lets small businesses keep track of who owes their money and so on and so forth. This was the fastest growing software company, SaaS company, right? It's called Software as a Service company in the history of the world. There's no software company in the history of the world that has grown as fast as theirs. So they got to 10 million merchants in about 18 months, right? And what they saw, which was very interesting during COVID, is that because the merchants were using software to document who owed them money, and the software sends notifications to the people that they own, and it keeps this sort of loop going, right? The average time for them to collect cash that was owed to them through a very small business in India for those millions of merchants came down by 80%. Right, which is quite remarkable, right? If you think about it, right? So if many millions of merchants now have a lot more cash or are able to revolve a lot more cash, you can imagine what that could do to them, right? So that's another example. And the first two companies are actually, Sequoia, and the second one is a Sequoia search company. But the third one is not a Sequoia company, but one that I met last week, which is super interesting, right? This entire team is from Carnegie Mellon. Okay, so they're computer science, robotics, and AI engineers from Carnegie Mellon in the US. They came back to Bangalore, and the founder could have done anything else, by the way, right? They could have worked for Google, they could have gone to the Valley, they could have launched a robotics company in the Valley. They came to Bangalore, and what they're building is a company called Tartan Sense. And Tartan Sense essentially builds drones, right? Autonomous drones that essentially are being deployed by cotton farmers to remove weeds on their fields. Right, so it's fascinating to see that here's the most advanced. I mean, this is a team that could pretty much build anything, right? They could go build the next rocket. Instead, what they're doing, Diksha, is they're building robotics for Indian agriculture, and for that matter, for cotton farmers, right? So it's very, very focused, and hopefully that gives you a sense. And by the way, these are just 3 examples, right? Just within the Sequoia portfolio now, we have so many companies that are so interesting, right? Until about a year and a half ago, Sequoia India had 0 investments in agricultural technology, right? Today we have 4 companies, and if you ask me today, what are the top 3 sectors that we are focused on as investors? Ag tech is one of them. So what you're seeing with ag tech, with SME digitization, with digital health, with edutech, all of these sectors are really core sectors to India, right? And what we're seeing now is Indian innovators who are truly building these solutions that are uniquely Indian for Indian consumers.
Thank you, Rajan. And that agri-tech example was fascinating. And I wonder, Jay, is there anything that you are excited about, that you are seeing in the market, any product, any company that's specifically innovating for Indian agricultural problems?
Picking up from what Rajan says, there is a number of startups in the robotics space. One of the challenges in Indian agriculture is, unlike a big Brazilian farmer who spends $10 million on equipment on his farm to be able to plant his 100,000 hectares of land or whatever, Indian farmers are actually caught in a bind where they cannot use mechanization. It's not viable for a 10-acre, 5-acre farmer to use mechanization. So I think the next few years we will see, really affordable robotics coming in to help farmers. Because if you look, nothing has changed on the farm, but labor costs, as inflation goes up, is increasing dramatically. So you need mechanization. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you paid probably 50 rupees a day. Today, you're paying 300, 400 rupees a day. Food prices haven't gone anywhere. They're flat. or even the government wants to control food inflation, so they don't let it go out of control. And the farmer's costs are going up. He's not able to mechanize because the larger technology companies do not invest for small farmers. So how do you create, how do you sort of, this gap is going to be a big opportunity where you have 100 million, 200 million farmers who are actually getting squeezed because they're not able to mechanize. They cannot afford to mechanize. It doesn't even make sense to mechanize using the traditional technology. No, there are a few we've talked to, we've invested in, which are doing all these in very interesting innovations for agriculture, and I think that will be huge. Sustainable food systems is such a big topic, and I think all this crop burning, all these kind of issues which farmers are using today, because they don't have the tools to change habits. And I think those companies who come with technologies for that, those sort of solutions, I think the food companies will start branding sustainable food differently. You'll be able to buy sustainable sugar and all those sort of things. And I think the younger generations around the world are quite excited about that. I have a big debate on and off is that what is I mean, the biggest pollutant in the world, 30% or so of greenhouse gases come from agriculture. And if we have a 5% improvement in practices in agriculture, you could actually have the biggest impact. Not the electric cars, not some of the other things. I think just a 5% change in sustainable practices in agriculture can make a huge difference to the carbon. In fact, I believe that it can actually solve this carbon issue quite fast. And we need to reward and recognize farmers who change practices and make it more, make their agriculture more sustainable. We're rewarding car companies, we're rewarding solar companies, we're rewarding everybody. Why don't we reward these billion smallholder, medium-sized, big farmers to change practices? If you do that, I think this carbon issue is more or less can be solved just by the farming community.
Thank you, Jay. Minister, I would like to come to you next. How easy is it for people on the ground to actually, use these new technologies that Jay and Rajan talked about? And how is it that the public and the private sector can work together to, accelerate the process of adoption of new emerging technologies?
Well, let me put it this way. I think not everybody need understand technology by itself. I think I'm not a technologist, for example. I'm a minister for information technology and industry, but I'm not a technologist by myself. But I do understand the potential of technology. I do understand the power of technology and what benefits it can offer me. So if you extend that logic, then I think each and every person in government and each and every person in our society needs to understand that there are better ways of doing things, and technology is only going to help us, further that cause. But I think we'll need certain things in place to be able to ensure that the benefits of technology actually reach the, bottom of the pyramid, as we call it. There are 5 things, I think, which are extremely important, from the perspective of ensuring that the benefits of these technologies can reach, the common man. One, of course, is our digital infrastructure. Today, even not just India, but if you look at the world itself, only 53% of the world today has access to internet. Now, that is something that absolutely needs to be, worked on by each and every government in their own respective countries and respective states. In our state of Telangana, we are, in fact, doing a very ambitious project called as a T-Fiber, which aims to connect the 10 million households in Telangana by the end of this year. Now, that is a truly ambitious and audacious goal that we have set for ourselves. But I believe once it's done, each of the connection is going to be a 100 Mbps connection, and wiring directly into, every household's drawing room into their television set. Once your television set is connected by this connection, each and every television can be converted into a smart PC. Once that happens, you can redefine how you can, Rajan was talking about this new product Misho, I think it was called, where every homemaker can actually start being a reseller. Now, that will truly amplify. This sort of access will amplify what can be done in commerce, what can be done in healthcare, what can be done in education, what can be done in the sense of government to citizen services. All of these can be augmented. Now, the other thing I think that's extremely important is skilling. Now, while these technologies, of course, are out there, I think we need skilled manpower. And again, to promote the ecosystem and to ensure that the benefits of these technologies, again, reach to the bottom of the pyramid. The other thing I also wanted to point out quickly is Rajan talked about how 37 unicorns have come about in India in the last several years. Just AI and data sciences, according to a study that I've read recently, have the potential to unlock more than $500 billion of value in India. Now, our Prime Minister talks about a 5 trillion economy by 2025. Now, 10% of that can be accomplished by just these two important technologies. So that goes to show you, that telling statistic goes to show you that we need to start investing more in our, the governments, the private sector, the governments working as enablers to bring in venture capital and the Sequoias of the win and invest, and handhold our brilliant young startups. The last thing I want to say, of course, we as a government need to start working on a robust policy framework as well, so as to ensure that none of these technologies, again, compromise on the fundamental core values, of a democracy, privacy, and many other such things that people are constantly worried about when it comes to leveraging new technologies. So a fine balance of all these aspects: infrastructure, skilling, ensuring that a robust policy framework is in place, and also ensuring that our investments in deep, technology, emerging technologies, and the startup space continue to grow. I think a combination of all this is, what will ensure that the benefits reach the bottom of the pyramid.
Megan, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think what the minister is saying is really central to this conversation about technology. What we're really talking about is changing a system, right, from end to end. We're really talking about stopping a kind of siloed innovation approach and really bringing that into a systems change approach. And that takes government, it takes private sector, it takes social entrepreneurs, it takes communities to all be part of that. So I think we can't discount how important the recognition of the complexity.
One moment, Megan, I'm sorry. I just want to add that we've concluded the first part of the session. Those who have joined us through TopLink can stay in this space. Yeah, sorry, go on.